a discussion that's going to surround faith, justice, and health. And we have some very, very special guests here to talk with us about that. So make sure you guys make sure you guys share it. We're going to give it a little bit of time for more people to come in, share this broadcast so that your family and friends can jump on and just learn a little bit about health, especially within our millennial community. And we'll just give it a couple more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can comment shared once you've shared it so that we know that you shared the broadcast. We're also going to be answering your questions surrounding faith, justice, and health. So if you have any questions, anything you would want to ask, make sure you drop those questions in there so we can read your questions. We can get your questions answered. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So first, I'm going to introduce our guests. Our guests are Dr. Lewis and Amanda Gilbert. Dr. Lewis and Amanda Gilbert are both family medicine physicians practicing in Greater Houston. Dr. Lewis is originally from Silsbee, Texas, while Dr. Amanda was born and raised in Chicago. Dr. Lewis is an alum of both Texas A&M University of North Texas Health and Science Center, where he earned his medical degree. Dr. Amanda is a graduate of Howard University and University of Illinois College of Medicine. They met and completed their family medicine training at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. They married in 2018. This year, through their shared love of God, His Word, and His people, they started an online community entitled Marriage Ministry Medicine, where they encourage others to build their lives on the strong foundation of faith, family, and wellness. In addition to creating content-filled videos that discuss topics in health and wellness, they also host a virtual Bible study every Saturday. With Dr. Lewis's background as an ordained elder in the Church of God in Christ and his current seminary training, they merge their passion for Christ and their knowledge of medicine to explore how we can all live our most abundant lives in mind, body, and spirit. And just based off those bios, I know they have some great things to share with us tonight. So we're going to dive right in. We're not going to waste any time. I think one of the first things, with this being the end of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we're kind of wrapping that up, when I was researching for this panel, I read a statistic from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and they reported that back in 2018, Black women and white women get diagnosed with breast cancer at about the same rate. But Black women are 40% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. And so is there any insight, anything you guys can you guys speak to that statistic, why you think that might be, and how we can kind of start bridging that gap?
Yes, definitely. So, really encouraging my patients to screen for breast cancer. That's something that's really, really important and passionate for me, and also with the history of breast cancer in my own family. What we see, though, even though we're Black women and white women are diagnosed at equal rates, it's looking at also at what stage we're finding it. So if it's more aggressive and later stage, then we understand that prognosis, the possibility for being able to survive would be less. And that is multifactorial when we think about why aren't Black women then why aren't we able to catch these earlier? And a lot of that deals with access to a primary care doctor, being able to afford mammograms, being able to connect the communities who are not able to afford those mammograms or care. How can we connect them with the free resources that are available in our community as well? So yeah, when we look at those disparities, we always have to look back. It's not just a matter of, oh, they're not getting screened. It's the why this is not happening and what we can do in our society to help that.
Dr. Lewis, anything you want to add? Or?
I agree with all of that.
Okay. And so I think you touched on something really important, which was that access, and that access, especially in Black communities and in minority communities in general, having access to affordable healthcare so that you can go get a screening when that time comes. And so, as everyone knows, we are coming up on like a really big election, and that's been one of like healthcare has been one of the major topics in all of the debates, and just affordable healthcare, Obamacare, and debating how effective or not effective that was. And so, what are you guys' thoughts on the upcoming election, affordable health care, and what we should be looking for in a healthcare plan?
So yeah, this election is very important, and I want to encourage everyone to get out and vote. In regards to what are we looking for in regards to healthcare, one side of the spectrum, they're looking to end the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And within that, they had something very special in the Affordable Care Act. That is, if you had pre-existing conditions, you could still get coverage. If we were to take that away, if you had a pre-existing condition, say for instance, you had hypertension, you had breast cancer, you had diabetes, the insurance company could deny you coverage. And so you would have to come out of your own pocket to pay for your health care. And so it's very important that we get out and vote and we protect those medical rights. I think we all have a right to excellent health care in America. And so to take that away would be an injustice to the millions of people who live in America and who need access. Like Amanda had recently said, Dr. Amanda had recently said, the importance of having access is so crucial for our community, the African American community. And so if you take that access away, if you take that insurance away, people will not have access, and we will see more detrimental outcomes in regards to breast cancer, diabetes, hypertension, whatever it may be.
Okay, and for everyone watching, make sure you guys are sending in questions. If you guys have any questions, any comments, make sure you send in those questions so I can read them. And then going back to touch on another point that you made, Dr. Amanda, about just getting checkups regularly and how important that is. I think especially with millennials, like we can get so caught up in the hustle, bustle of life and everything that we have going on that you really don't have time to go see a doctor, and especially not those like specialized appointments where I'm just getting a checkup. I feel fine. I'm gonna keep going. And so for us, like how important it is. Can you stress the importance as a physician of getting regular checkups?
Yes, yes. So definitely, I recommend, a lot of times there's the idea that, well, in terms of doing yearly screenings, maybe you don't really have to do those until you get older. I encourage all of my patients, even from when I transition patients from pediatric care, come in yearly. Let's sit down and talk. Let's figure out kind of what screenings are available for you. Of course, for women, at least every 3 years, you need to be coming in for when you're between the ages of 21 and 30 for your well woman's exams to get those pap smear done and things of that nature. But it's good just to know, especially within our community, a lot of times when we're seeing certain health conditions like diabetes, hypertension, those are preventable. And it's those lifestyle habits that we start with in our 20s, our 30s, that set us up for success, or have those set us up for failure, rather, later on in our life. So it's really important to have that primary care doctor, one that you can talk with, that you can also discuss your family history with, so that way your primary care doctor knows different screenings or different avenues where we need to be a little bit more preventive in terms of discussing that with you, and a little bit more active and proactive about that. So as millennials, I know we're busy. This year has been definitely weird, to say the least, but it always is a good idea to still make time of putting your health and your temple that God has given us as a priority, and making sure that you're finding a doctor that you feel comfortable talking with, and just who really cares and is looking out for you.
And you made a really, really good point about just those lifestyle, just the lifestyle that you live and being proactive rather than reactive, and how a lot of problems that arise are preventable. And so, what are some tips that you all suggest to your patients, but maybe you guys also have incorporated into your daily life? You know, even with everything happening and being busy, you make it a point to just do these things because you know it's essential to your health. And like you said, protecting the temple that God gave you.
So yeah, I would just like to add on, in addition to what Dr. Amanda just said, hypertension and diabetes are the number 1 and 2 causes of kidney failure in America. And so just being an African American puts you at increased risk for hypertension and diabetes. And so studies also show that you can have diabetes up to 5 years before you actually even experience any symptoms. So the importance of screening is so vital in our community, that even as you transition from pediatric care to adult care, you get your screenings done so we can prevent things like chronic kidney disease and amputations of limbs and loss of eyesight, which we see a lot in our community. In regards to habits that I include into my daily routine, I think it's important that you take a break, that you pause, that you take a minute just to pull away from the constant grind of work or whatever it is that you do throughout the day. I feel like having that 15 minutes, whether it be meditation, whether it be prayer, whatever you can do to pull away from the constant demands of life, I feel like that's important. Important for your mental health, also important for your physical health and your spiritual health. All of those things are linked together. And so it's important that you take time to reconnect with what's important, and that you center yourself.
Yeah. And definitely, I think too, taking care of that, like from that mind, body, spirit, having that moment of meditation, of that Sabbath rest, of taking that time away. And then in terms of the body, making sure that you're exercising. You know, the American Heart Association says 30 minutes of something that's just going to get your heart rate up most days out of the week. So just doing something that can be as fun as quick as a walk after dinner, or something as fun as like a family dance competition, you know, something that's going to really get you moving, especially where so many of us now are working from home or mostly at home. You know, the gym still may not be open, or you may not feel comfortable yet. Just making sure you do have something where you're getting your body moving too.
Thank you. And I think you made a good point about focusing on your mind, your body, and your spirit. I think, especially me as like a young person, you feel like, okay, well, I have a job, my bills are paid, I'm good in that area. I'm doing good in school, I'm good in that area. Like everything else is good. And it seems like our health sometimes seems to just get put on the back burner. Like that comes last. As long as I'm good with everything else that's going on, like that ends up falling by the wayside a little bit. And so I think it's important to stress like that you need to be up to par in all of those areas in order to be your best self.
Right.
And we do have a question. Someone asked, Letitia Blackman asked for Dr. Amanda and Dr. Lewis. What is your thoughts on dementia, and whether it is hereditary or not? It appears to be so prevalent in the Black community, but I keep hearing it's not hereditary.
So that is a good question. So there is a genetic component set up with dementia. There is an early onset dementia, which we do see in Alzheimer's patients, where we do have a screening, we do have a test where we can check for that to see if you fall into that risk category. So there is a genetic component. And then there's an environmental component, which we really don't have all the answers to when people develop dementia. So it's a little bit of both. I think that part of dementia and that study in neurology, we still have a lot of questions that we don't have a lot of answers to. But as far as right now, we do know that there is a genetic component as well as an environmental component.
And we have one other question that just came in. What do you say to people that say, all I need is faith, I don't need to go to the doctor?
Well, I would say, first of all, the Bible does instruct us to seek wise counsel, you know. And so understanding that God has gifted, as the great physician, He's gifted us to understand people who have trained in medicine. He's gifted us with the knowledge to understand His creation, the human body. And so it would be a disservice to our faith to not take care of our temples, because these bodies are going to be what helps us to get done all of the will and the purpose of God, all those things that he's called us to do. But if you are laid up in the hospital with kidney failure, with a stroke, with a heart attack, how are you going to be able to run on and see what the end's going to be? You're not going to make it. So that's why it's so important, especially when people of faith, people especially who are involved in the church, but sometimes we will run ourselves ragged and not take care of ourselves. God even demonstrated that, as Lewis was saying, that in the beginning, he commanded us to take rest. And so a part of that is taking care of our bodies. So you need Jesus, you need a doctor, and making sure that we're talking all those things through. That's really important.
Yeah, from a biblical standpoint, also, the Great Commission, Matthew 28, Jesus said, "Go ye therefore and make disciples." And so as a believer, we do have a purpose. We do have a plan that God has for us. And our bodies have to be healthy in order to accomplish that plan. So we can't think that, I'm just going to live for today when God has given us a mission to go out and make disciples.
And we have some more questions coming in from people watching. K1 asks, how important is it to know our family's health history? And I think I can kind of throw this next question in there because they kind of go together a little bit. Hazel Wynn asked, does the quality of life play a bigger role in our health than our DNA as African Americans? So those kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, so I can answer the first part of that question. I stress this is so important. We need to have conversations about our health and our family. Because a lot of times, and this might be a cultural thing too, we can be very prideful at some point sometimes about our health, and we don't like to talk about it. We don't know what Big Mama died of. We don't know. We don't know Uncle so-and-so, he just dropped dead one day. We went to the funeral. We don't know exactly what happened. It's really important that we have those conversations. So I always ask my patients, any heart issues in your family? No, I don't think so. What about any cancers in your family? Any conditions? And if you don't know, this would be a good time to actually go home and have that conversation. And for the sake of the elders explaining, this is important to me because this can impact my health. So, as an encouragement to know that, because there are certain things, like for instance, when we think about colon cancer, based off if you have colon cancer, especially in first degree relatives, so your mom, dad, siblings, if there's a risk, there is a higher risk if you have first degree relatives, and depending on the age at which they were diagnosed. And if we don't know that, we wouldn't even know to screen you for it. So that's why it's really important we have those conversations. And maybe just as like in our family Bible, we write down everybody's name. It wouldn't be a bad idea just to write everybody's conditions down too. Maybe not in the Bible, but maybe in a separate sheet. So we know, what we should be looking out for.
Go ahead. Can you repeat that second question?
Yes, I was going to say, and then to tie in the second part of the question, does knowing basically our family's health history and our DNA, does living a healthier life play a bigger role than that? So is living a healthier life more important than having a healthy lifestyle more important than like our family's health history, or is one more important than the other?
I would say it all kind of fits together. I think when you know your family history, you know what to look out for and kind of be proactive and avoid and take a preventive type approach. I wouldn't say necessarily one is more important than the other. We do stress, just regardless of your history, exercise, eating right, taking that time to rest, those things are important across the board, across the line. So in regards to quality and history, I would say they kind of play together with each other.
Okay. And then I want to go into one more statistic that I learned when I researched, which was pretty interesting to me. In 2019, the CDC also reported that Black, American Indian, and Alaskan Native women are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. For women over 30, it was 4 to 5 times higher. Can you all speak to that and offer any type of insight on why that might be that way, and what steps, like as a woman who is looking to have a child, what steps can you take, to prevent that?
Right. This is something, as a Black woman, is really close to my heart when we look at the mortality and the morbidity rate surrounded with giving birth, that postpartum period. There was just a young Black doctor, pediatrician resident, who passed away right after giving birth with preeclampsia. So this idea, and I think we talked about this, not only is it access, but it's also this idea of equity. So when you can have access to the same doctors, the best doctors, the same hospital, all of that, but when you get there, if there's going to be a lack of equality and justice there, that component of equity, this is what sets us up for these bad outcomes. This is what sets us up when Black women are complaining about pain, that they're not taking it seriously. Now, we know from, as this now has become more exposed, and I think I can attest to this in my own medical training, there's a lot of bias that is placed that, that just is inherent within the medical training. And there are a lot of medical professionals and educators who are really taking that task on about how can we address it head on. And really, I think that's the root of it. And not until we're training doctors who are empathetic across the board, who believe in equity, who are able to address their own level of bias, we're still always going to be kind of behind the 8 ball.
Okay, and so I think that transitions into my next question really well. So as far as like racial and ethnic diversity in those mental health professions, as your primary care physician, as your OBGYN, can you speak to like what those numbers are like now? Should we be looking to increase them? Do we need more Black doctors and Black medical health professionals in general, Black researchers? And what could that do for some of these mortality rates that we've been seeing? Like, could that help improve those?
Absolutely. I think when I was in medical school, I think 1% of all medical students were African American, and then 0.5. I think it was split. 0.5 was female African Americans, and 0.5 was male African American medical students. So that is not a great statistic if you think about that. 1% out of all medical students. So we're talking about hundreds of medical students in the United States. And so it's important that we create pipelines to get African Americans into medical school, that we advocate for our young brothers and sisters to get them the help that they need, to get them not just the help, but also give them the encouragement, the level of focus and the tools to be able to go to medical school and be successful. It will make a tremendous difference when you can see a doctor that looks like you. I tell this story all the time. It was a young African American lady. She was the mother of 2 young Black men, and she was a single mother. And she said, I intentionally brought my kids to come see you because I wanted them to see a doctor that looked like them, that could relate to them and speak to them. And so that's important. So this bias that we see that's so entrenched in medicine, that goes back several decades and years of being just a predominantly white field. But once we get more African American, once we get more diversity into the medical field, then we'll see some of this bias and the equity. We'll see some of that to change, and we'll see health outcomes for our people, for minorities. We'll see that begin to change as well, because you'll be actually treated by people who look like you, who have experienced the same things that you have experienced in life.
I totally agree.
And I think you made a really good point too about, not just getting people that look like us to go to medical school, but also giving them the tools to be successful. Because I think that's just a part of that like disparity, is that we have a lot of other factors going on that kind of prevent us from sometimes having the same success, especially in those higher level education programs. So that's really important for us to just have those, to have that equal access, and for us millennials to be actively seeking out those opportunities. And then we have a couple more questions that I'm going to read out. Alvin Thomas asked, how important is getting the proper hours of sleep to our health as we grow older?
Oh, yes, that is so, so important. Sleep. What research was showing and has shown is that when we don't get enough sleep, that actually affects our immune system. That means that you're not going to be operating at 100% when you're only running off of like 4 hours of sleep and a Red Bull. It's not going to work. Eventually, something is going to give way. So I usually say recommend 6 to 8 hours, closer to those 8 hours if you can. And then two, it's a combination too of that sleep hygiene that leads up to even getting that helpful and that restful sleep. So making sure, like, on your phone, even if you do have like that access where you can turn down the light, the blue light, that still kind of keeps your circadian rhythm going. And it's even difficult to have your brain shut down to get that adequate amount of sleep. So definitely you have to get rest. I feel like sleep and proper nutrition, they go hand in hand. That's how your body is fueled. It's the energy for your body. And so just as if you had a luxury car, you wouldn't put the low grade stuff in there the same way that, if with your body, you don't want to put low grades amount of sleep in there, nor nutrition.
And I think I'm not a doctor, but I have a point to add to that. I recently did a research project on sleep, so that's a good question. And one statistic that I found really interesting, really strange, is that not having enough sleep, it can be compared, like sleep deprivation can be compared. Your body is kind of operating the same as it would if you were intoxicated. So that's something interesting to note, that your body is kind of functioning as if you had a blood alcohol level that was over the legal limit. And so that just speaks to like how important it is to really get enough sleep to be able to function.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another question was, can you agree when it comes to mental health treatment, Blacks are at a disadvantage than whites?
The question is, are Blacks at a disadvantage?
Yes. Would you agree that Blacks are at a disadvantage Blacks are at a disadvantage to whites when it comes to mental health?
That's a difficult question. I think in our community, it's almost taboo to kind of speak about mental health. And so we carry a lot of weight, we carry a lot of burden, we carry a lot of things in silence. And so we don't access the mental health experts that we need to address a lot of our mental issues. And honestly, there are mental issues that we carry around for generations, literally for generations. You will see anxiety passed down from one generation to the next. And no one speaks up and accesses a mental health expert. In regards to being a disadvantage, I would recommend that for mental health, it's good to find someone that you're comfortable with. Because mental health, you're going to be expressing a lot of your inner feelings. And if you don't feel comfortable with the doctor that you're speaking to, you're not going to be able to get the right feedback that you need to make the right adjustments in your life. So I don't know if I would say that we're at a disadvantage. I think we have to be more open about kind of how we're feeling mentally, not try to suppress how we're feeling, and kind of what we like to do also in the church. We like to spiritually bypass a lot of mental health issues in the church, and we can't blame everything on the devil. Some things you just need to go to counseling for. You know, some things it's good to pray, but it's also good to have somebody that you can confess how you're feeling to. And there's no shame. I like that statement that just popped up. There's no shame in utilizing mental health services. I've had older patients who, I don't want to go see the shrink. I don't want to go see, the psychiatrist. And that's just the wrong way to look at it. Life is tough. Life can be, it can be tough. And so it's good that you have people in your life, be it mental health experts, pastors, church leaders, that you can go and talk to about how you're feeling and get good feedback and redirection.
Mm-hmm. And I think the mental health, that could be a whole nother form in our communities, especially amongst us millennials.
Absolutely.
We're going to do a little transition here. So, of course, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. And with everything going on with news that it has been affecting our communities, minority communities, more than other communities, and that we are dying at higher rates than other groups of people. Can you all just tell us, why is our health so much more important now, more than ever?
Right. So when we're in the midst of this pandemic, we have to understand that everything kind of boils down to how our immune system is functioning, and that is multifactorial when we think about it. So, as we talked about certain things like, okay, how you're eating, how are you sleeping, understanding the conditions that you already have that will possibly lower the effort of your immune system to be able to fight if you were to contract COVID. So those are things like type 2 diabetes if it's uncontrolled, high blood pressure, asthmatic. So even some like young people that have suffered with asthma their entire life, and we know a lot of times in the Black community, a lot of chronic lung diseases, that we are at higher risk for them and higher risk of them being uncontrolled. So when we think about wellness, if anything, this pandemic, hopefully for our community, has spotlighted the importance for us to take our health seriously. For us to really have discussions like this as a community, as people of faith. How can we really encourage us to really live that abundant life in mind, body, and spirit that is promised through us in the Word? So really, this pandemic, I think, has shifted, hopefully shifted our focus of really understanding the importance of taking care of ourselves.
And then we had one more question in regards to COVID-19. In your opinions, do you see COVID-19 as slowing down and almost over, or should we be preparing for a second wave?
So it's not slowing down by all means. One doctor that I like to always kind of see what his thoughts are is Dr. Anthony Fauci. I feel like he is the top doctor when it comes to infectious disease. And so he just came out and made the statement uh, that we are not getting any better in regards to COVID, that we are actually seeing spikes in several states in the United States of COVID-19. So I wouldn't let my guard down. If I was you, I would continue to maintain that 6 feet of distance between you and your neighbor, wear your mask, wash your hands. This thing is really is ramping up again. And we're entering the cold months. We're entering the winter where people tend to gather more closely in the winter months. And so we're still seeing this spread of COVID-19. And we also have to be on guard for the flu. We're in flu season. And so not only COVID-19, but you have to protect yourself against the flu. And so those are two infectious diseases that can be very deadly if you have a weakened immune system, if you're not living in wellness. So to answer the question, no, I don't think that we are seeing any improvement at this time with COVID-19.
Okay, and then we have one more question. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Amanda do have a presentation for us, so we're going to answer this question, and then we're going to transition into what you guys have for us. So Colette Winston asked, how would you suggest that we as parents help our younger children deal with all of the stress that they may be experiencing with COVID, at-home learning, and the civil unrest?
Yeah, those are two big components. One, who would have thought that this is what 2020 would have been? And even it's been difficult as adults to process a lot of this. So I can only imagine what it's like to be a kid and try to wrap your head around this, and even just focus yourself to be disciplined enough to be at home and now try to train and get your education. And then especially for our African American young people, wrapping your head around the injustice, seeing it so blatant, throughout all forms of social media, not just on the television, there may be your local news, but this is like worldwide attention that we're facing. I think the biggest things that we can do is anyone who has younger people in our lives, talk with them, creating open space where they feel comfortable to let you know what's going on. I saw this meme today on Instagram. They said it was a kid said, "Mom, I think I feel depressed." And she said, "You better go in there and depress them dishes." Classic kind of like Black mom statements. This is not the time to do that. Like if your kid is using these terminologies, if they can tell you, even if they don't have the verbiage to say, "I feel depressed" or "I feel really anxious," if you hear them saying or singing like they're more isolating themselves from family. Sometimes little ones, they'll just complain like, "Man, my tummy hurts all the time. I don't want to eat. I don't, feel well." Like after you kind of talk it over with their pediatrician and it's still nothing can be found, Like, don't rule out that they may be going through some anxiety and depression. And again, too, therapy, family therapy, that is an excellent option, especially during this time, because this is a crisis that we're all dealing with. Um, and in terms of building mental resilience, when you're little, you don't really have that just yet. Some of us adults, we don't even have that yet. So it's really important that we're creating those open spaces that they feel free to talk to us.
Okay, and then we can go into what you guys have for us, the presentation that you guys have for us.
Yeah, so some of these points we actually already kind of addressed, just thinking about how we can stay well during this pandemic, and just things for us to always to consider. So the first thing we wanted to discuss as one of those tips is thinking about healthy boundaries. How can we create those healthy boundaries, especially as a lot of us have transitioned from working at home. So I really implore you, one thing, if you can, if your hours are still 9 to 5, put the computer down at 5 o'clock, step away, making sure you're able, don't check your emails throughout the evening, create that healthy distance. And even when you're at home, creating healthy boundaries that this is going to be my workspace and this is everything else space. Making sure that you're thinking about how you're going to position yourself even while you're on your computer, because you don't want to just end up with any issues like back pain, joint pain, with always being on the computer for those long periods of time.
And it's also important to schedule times for pulling away, for exercise. Schedule that into your work schedule or into your daily schedule at times that you're going to set a boundary. At this time, I'm just going to put everything aside and focus on me, focus on my health, focus on my wellness. That's another boundary that we recommend that you set. The next thing that we would like to present is to check in with your doctor to maintain your health. Uh, uh, During the beginning of COVID-19, we saw a lot of patients, they were very afraid to come into the doctor's office, but we have seen more people utilizing telehealth, telemedicine. So that is very important. You want to stay in contact with your PCP, with your primary care physician, just to make sure that if you do have a high blood pressure, that you're taking care of that. If you do have diabetes, that you're maintaining really, really good sugar levels, or any other chronic illness that you have, you want to keep in contact with your primary care doctor to make sure that those things are being well controlled.
Yeah. And I believe also in the importance of being intentionally intergenerational. So, even though as we're talking with more of our millennials, let's make sure that we're not so secluded within ourselves that we're not reaching out to our elders. So a good thing is just to ask them, hey, do you have the supplies that you need, like all your medical supplies? Do you need me to help pick up your medications for you? Do you have a blood pressure cuff at home if you have high blood pressure? So just in case you start feeling a little funny, you can check it at home, as well as just checking your sugars too, and being available to help them to get those supplies. So the next tip that we have is to continue with regular screenings. And we briefly talked about this, the importance of getting your mammograms, for young women and above until you're 65, making sure you're still getting your pap smears, colon cancer screenings, as we, still deal with and honor the life of Chadwick Boseman, understanding the importance of knowing, first of all, your family history for colon cancer, and then talking it over with your PCP. When should you get screened? When should that be for you? And also PAP, we talked about making sure just your general physical exams. And then for our older family members, thinking about our Medicare wellness exams.
And for men, PSA checks at the age of 50, at least we should be getting our PSA level check for prostate cancer. The next tip is to be mindful of what you are consuming physically. Amanda made a great statement. If you have a luxury vehicle, you don't want to put cheap gas in the luxury vehicle because you want it to operate at its full capacity. So you have to be very mindful what you put into your body, not just physically what you put into your body, but you want to be mindful of what you're putting into your mind mentally. And going back to those boundaries, I think you have to set a time that I'm going to watch 15 minutes of the news and that's it. Sometimes we can overconsume the news, the 24-hour news cycle, and it can kind of add stress to our mind and to our body. So you want to make sure that you're guarding and that you're consuming the right amount of media, social media, and news on TV, as well as eating healthy. You want to make sure that you're eating plenty of fruits, vegetables, lean meats. I encourage all my patients to kind of shift over if you do eat meat, that you eat lean meat. So chicken, turkey, things like that, that will be very healthy to your body.
And also just thinking as we already touched on, Dr. Lewis had mentioned about what you're consuming mentally. So being able to step away from that 24-hour news cycle. And I know I was terrible at this at the beginning of the pandemic. I literally was watching the news or on my phone, checking it from the time I woke up. At work, I had my little Alexa. So in between patients, I was listening to NPR of like all the updates, and I would come home and turn on CNN, like until we went to bed. And finally, like Lewis had presented this article that he said, like, yeah, I read this article about the importance of stepping away from the 24 hours news cycle, because what ends up happening, if you're always engaged, that can actually increase your risk of anxiety. There's been studies that showed if you're so engaged, especially when we're in a national crisis like this, to that 24-hour news cycle, years down the line, that can actually increase your risk for heart disease because you're putting all that stress on yourself. So that's one of the tips too. Be careful of what you're consuming mentally, even what we're talking about. You know, as believers, we know that life and death is in the power of the tongue. So be careful. Are you always talking when you get on the phone, always talking about COVID? Always talking about being afraid with your family? Always, yeah, no, let's make sure that we're speaking positivity and even encouraging ourselves during this very difficult and weird time.
The next tip is to recognize signs of depression. So this is very important. Amanda made a great comment about children. So if you see any change in the behavior of your child or any young one, little one, that could be a sign of depression or anxiety. So you want to make sure that we're watching our youngsters for any change in their behavior, but as well as adults. Sometimes we can suppress our depression and our anxiety, and we just try to keep moving and keep doing what we have been doing. But it's so important that we recognize the signs of depression. So signs of depression, so changes in your sleep pattern, if you become more irritable, if you have a sense of guilt, if you have lack of energy, if you have a change in your level of concentration, if you have any type of psychomotor kind of changes. So if you notice that you're shaking your leg more often, or you're tapping your pen more often, all of these are signs that you may be dealing with a little bit of depression, okay, and that you need to speak to your primary care physician so they can talk to you about a plan to treat your depression.
Right, right. And additionally, when we think about depression, on the flip side of the coin, and even maybe there may be a little bit of mixture of both, anxiety. You know, I love how Lewis said, you know, a lot of times we're seeing these things that have been passed on from generation to generation. And Granny may have called it, should I just get the nerves? My nerves is bad. My nerves are real bad. And now we have the vocabulary to say that was actually anxiety. And, you know, maybe you are experiencing that too. So really kind of being aware, like if you feel like, you know, sometimes when I am trying to get that sleep that you talked about that was so important, I feel like I have a million tabs up in my head, Dr. Gilbert, and I cannot shut those things off. I just have racing thoughts that keep me up at night. I'm always worried that something is going to happen. Even maybe get into the impact where you're having panic attacks, where it feels like, yeah, my heart is beating out of my chest. I feel like I'm going to die. And you have no past history of having any heart issues. That might be some anxiety that's presenting. And definitely you want to talk to your primary care doctor and even seek out a therapist. So it's really important that we're kind of aware of those signs and then able to have those healthy resources to talk through.
In addition to anxiety, I read a great article and it mentioned that so often we focus on stress management. We try to manage our stress, whereas we should really try to work on our stressors. So often we focus on, let me get a massage, let me just take a break, but we still deal with the same thing day in and day out of what's causing the stress. So maybe we should shift our focus from stress management to let me go deal with that, whatever is stressing me out. It could be something on your job, it can be something in your home. And sometimes if you can deal with the stressor, it can bring down the level of stress so you don't have to rely so much on stress management when you deal with the stressor.
Yeah, that's really good. The next tip is understanding getting a healthy night's rest. We had a question about that. And we did get some really good evidence of showing too that when you are sleepy, when you are sleep deprived to the point, it's almost like you've been drinking. And so, just in the same way, we should not be operating our lives, being intoxicated, the same way we should not be operating our lives being sleep deprived. Okay, so we already talked about that earlier, but again, this will be a good night to start that healthy sleep regimen, healthy sleep hygiene, to get that 6 to 8 hours of sleep.
And the next tip is to get moving. We mentioned this. We want to try to exercise 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Or you can split it up. You can exercise 3 days a week for 50 minutes, 150 minutes per week of some type of aerobic exercise is good for the heart, according to the American Heart Association. So you want to get active, you want to get moving. I know it's difficult right now in this season that we're in with COVID-19, but you can find things around your home, around your neighborhood, out in the open where you can get active, get moving to make sure you're keeping your body in good health.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And lastly, keep a gratitude journal. This is really an interesting concept. I remember I was introduced to this when I was in medical school, like my first year. And one of the professors encouraged us, how about, every day I want you all to write down at least one thing that you're grateful for. And if anyone knows that had, friends that are physicians, family members, that first year in medical school is tough. It's difficult to find anything to be happy about during that time. And at first, when I first heard this, I said, this might sound a little bit too hippie for me. Keeping a gratitude journal, what is all this business about? But there's actually research that shows in both neurology and psychology that when we have this act of literally writing down what we're grateful for, that it helps us to build what we call mental resilience. So when we come through difficult times, we've already kind of trained our brain how to avoid falling into depression, avoid falling into anxiety, or even if we do find ourselves slipping, we're able to be able to catch it. We're able to see, okay, I'm noticing the difference, I'm feeling the difference, and now I'm able to actually, first admit that to myself and then seek that help. So 1 to 3 things every day that you're grateful for, jotting it down. You can even make it a little Pinterest project, get a nice little jug for the family, put some Post-its in there when hey, I want to write down what I'm grateful for. I'm going to drop it in the jar, and you can actually see your gratitude growing.
And to kind of talk about that a little bit more, when you look at the book of Psalms, we see David in his gratitude journal. He's writing of what he's grateful for that God has done for him. David said, I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be on my mouth. David had that gratitude journal that sometimes if you're struggling to find things that you're grateful for, go take a peek in David's gratitude journal and just open up the Psalms and just see how wonderful it is to have a loving God who's unchanging in the midst of these changing seasons that we're in, that we can take courage, that we have a God who cares for us, that God who sees us, just like he saw Hagar. When Hagar felt like she was all alone, when she was kicked out of the community, she found out that she had a God who sees. And so it's important that we keep that gratitude journal and that we remember how great the God that we serve.
Amen. So those are all of our tips, and we thank you all so much for listening to us and being able to share with you all tonight.
Thank you so much. And we definitely appreciate all of those tips. I mean, you guys gave us a lot, but out of everything, I think, especially for millennials, any millennials that are watching, I think that gratitude journal is so important because just from day to day, it can seem like you focus on what you don't have, what you need to get, what you need to be doing, what you feel like you should be doing. But it's important to focus on, what you have, what you are grateful for that you have. And even if it's just the simple things, even if it's just breath in your body, just to be thankful for what you have. And so we're going to bring on our senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Vernon C. Walton, for some quick comments. So good evening, Pastor Walton.
How are you? Thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm hearing you double for some reason.
Our senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Vernon C. Walton, for some quick comments. So,
good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Pastor Walton.
Good. How are you?
How are you?
Thank you so much. If you can hear me, I'm hearing you double for some reason. I want to thank you both for being with us.
How are you?
Let me try this again.
Try it one more time. Okay, so while he works on that, we did have some other questions, so maybe we can just jump in and do a couple quick questions while we wait. Aaron Williford asked, any advice for an essential worker would be good?
Yeah, so I think it is, regardless of if you're an essential worker in healthcare or essential, which I think I always, during this pandemic, I thank so much our people who work at Kroger, at HEB, the cashier, all of that. I thank them so much because they really have been the MVPs throughout all of this. The biggest thing is making sure that you're staying safe. You work with the public, so you're at risk. So wearing your mask, too, and then getting your flu shot. Everybody really should be getting their flu shot. As we said, flu season happens yearly, regardless of the pandemic, and flu is not going to take a break. And we're not even sure, too, like what that might look like, if it is possible to have both flu and COVID testing positive at the same time. So at least you at least can protect yourself against the flu by getting your flu shot. So those are going to be the biggest thing. And then getting rest, taking time, because it can be stressful. We have not, as essential workers, like not too much has changed for us, especially as healthcare providers. We still are going to work every day. We, couldn't transition from being at home. So again, like all those things that like Dr. Lewis had mentioned, taking that time to step away, taking care of yourself and your family, that's really important.
Thank you. And you actually, here we go. Pastor Walton, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about those technical difficulties. It was my fault. I had Facebook and both entities going at the same time. I want to just take a few moments and thank both Dr. Gilberts for being with us tonight. I have been blessed by your sharing. We are the better as a result of your being here. And it is so good to see doctors who are passionate about what they're doing and doctors who have a relationship with God. And so thank you so much for being a blessing to our entire faith community tonight. We're grateful to God for your presence. I want to also just give a shout out to our newfound Oprah tonight. Kaya, what a great job leading us in this conversation. And a huge shout out to Minister Christian Brown, who coordinated our Faith and Justice series, and to our young adult ministry leaders. I praise God for you. You have opened our eyes this month. You've allowed us to engage in some conversations that sometimes make us uncomfortable, but these are necessary conversations, and you've allowed those of us who are not millennials to eavesdrop on this conversation as well. And for that, we are eternally grateful. I just want to say to those persons that are watching, stay tuned, listen out. There's more of this to come. We have received the message. We've heard from you, and please stay tuned and look forward to the plans that we will have in the very near future. Thank you so very much for being with us tonight. Thank you again, both of you doctors, for doing a great job. Thank you, Kaya, for doing a stellar job. And again, to our young adult leaders, I am so appreciative for you. And the best is yet to come. I'm going to leave you back in good hands with Sister Kaya. You can take us out however you want to.
So we just want to end by saying thank you so much, Dr. Lewis and Dr. Amanda. You guys gave us such valuable information, and especially in the midst of a pandemic, definitely information that we can use. Before you guys go, just leave us with how people can find you. You guys host a Bible study. If we wanted to join that Bible study, or your marriage ministry medicine online community, how can we find Dr. Lewis and Dr. Amanda?
Sure. So you can follow us. We are on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at Marriage Ministry Medicine. So feel free to connect with us there. And then our Bible studies are hosted at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time every Saturday. So if you're interested, we do have the link there on our Instagram page as well as on our Facebook page. Or you can just keep it old school and send us an email to marriageministrymedicine@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to share that information with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who watched. Thank you to everyone who asked us questions. And I hope that everyone is just walking away from here with some type of information that you guys can take on and that'll be beneficial to you surrounding faith, justice, and health.